The Romanovs, the last Tsars of Russia. They ruled with divine authority until their divinity ran out. The Romanov dynasty began in 1613, rising from chaos to rule Russia for over 300 years. Tsars and Tsarinas claimed their crowns through God's will, yet their empire was built on inequality, mysticism, and fear. By the early 20th century, Nicholas II's rule crumbled under the weight of revolution and war. His desperate trust in the mystic Rasputin, rumored healer, rumored manipulator, deepened public outrage. When revolution erupted in 1917, the Romanovs were forced to abdicate, imprisoned, and later executed, ending 3 centuries of monarchy. Yet legends refused to die. Stories of Anastasia's escape haunted Europe for decades, as if history itself could not let go. The Romanovs' fall was not just political, it was almost mythic. The idea of divine kingship collapsed in the age of machines and mass revolt. Imagine their final night in Ekaterinburg, candlelight trembling on the walls, a family still praying for deliverance that never came. The House of Borgia, the Vatican's poison line. Saints prayed in their halls. Sinners ruled from their thrones. The Borgias rose from Spain to dominate Renaissance Italy, their power reaching the heart of the Vatican itself. Rodrigo Borgia became Pope Alexander VI in 1492, ruling not as a holy shepherd but as a calculating monarch. His reign overflowed with scandal, bribery, political marriages, and whispered crimes that blurred truth and propaganda alike. His son, Cesare Borgia, was the architect of a ruthless vision to unite Italy under his iron hand. His daughter, Lucrezia, became a pawn of diplomacy and rumor, saint to some, serpent to others. To the public, the Borgias embodied corruption sanctified by faith, a dynasty that made the Vatican pulse with both beauty and deceit. Their end came swiftly. Poisonings, betrayals, and rival popes dismantled their legacy within a generation. Yet their legend never faded, the Holy Family who turned Rome into a stage of sin. Picture candlelit corridors heavy with incense, every prayer shadowed by the scent of power. The Habsburgs, faces of power, deformed by fate. They ruled half the world, and paid the price in their own blood. For nearly 6 centuries, the Habsburgs shaped Europe's destiny. Their empire stretched from Vienna to Madrid, from the Alps to the Andes. They conquered not through war, but through marriage, sealing alliances with vows instead of blades. Their motto said it all: let others wage war, you, happy Austria, marry. But that same strategy became their undoing. Generations of inbreeding to preserve pure royal blood twisted their lineage. The infamous Habsburg jaw, a genetic deformity, became the dynasty's grim emblem. Their last Spanish ruler, Charles II, was frail, infertile, and plagued by illness, unable to continue the line. His death in 1700 plunged Europe into the War of the Spanish Succession. The Habsburgs believed they were chosen by God to rule forever. Yet their downfall came not from enemies, but from their own obsession with divine inheritance. Imagine portraits of solemn kings with elongated faces, painted smiles hiding centuries of decay, a dynasty that tried to master destiny, only to be consumed by it. The Qin dynasty, China's empire of obsession. It sought eternity, and vanished within a single lifetime. In 221 BCE, Qin Shi Huang united warring states into a single Chinese empire, declaring himself the first emperor. His rule transformed the ancient world. Walls were raised, roads stretched across mountains, and the written word was standardized. Yet behind this grandeur was a mind consumed by fear. He hunted for elixirs of immortality, trusting alchemists who promised eternal life and unknowingly filled his body with mercury. Obsessed with control, he ordered scholars buried alive, their books burned, so that no rival truth could outlive him. His mausoleum, a city beneath the earth, was guarded by an army of terracotta soldiers, each one unique, each frozen in eternal service. When Qin Shi Huang died, his empire collapsed almost instantly. Peasants rebelled, generals defected, and the dynasty that built forever lasted only 15 years. To the Chinese, it became a parable: no wall, no army, no emperor can outlive the corruption of power. Imagine the buried tomb, rivers of mercury rumored to flow around his chamber, a monument to a man who feared death so much, he buried himself alive in his own legend. The Capetians, France's line of the damned kings. A curse spoken in fire and fulfilled in blood. In 1314, King Philip IV of France stood triumphant. He had crushed the Knights Templar, seized their treasures, and executed their last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. But as flames devoured him, de Molay shouted a curse, summoning the king and his bloodline to divine judgment within the year. It was no empty threat. Within months, Philip was dead. His sons, who followed him as kings, each met early deaths through sickness, betrayal, or scandal. By 1328, the direct Capetion line had ended, sparking the 100 Years' War and tearing France apart. Medieval Europe saw it as proof that divine justice could burn through even royal blood. Chroniclers wrote of ghostly omens and cursed crowns, of kings haunted by the pyre's echo. In their downfall, the Capetians became legend, rulers who thought they could destroy faith, only to be destroyed by it. Picture Notre Dame's bells tolling through the night, black banners rippling in the wind, and a silent throne that once belonged to the most Christian king, now claimed by the curse he unleashed. The Ming Dynasty, the walls that couldn't keep fate out. They built walls to keep chaos away, and trapped themselves inside. Born from rebellion in 1368, the Ming Dynasty restored Chinese rule after a century of Mongol domination. Its early emperors rebuilt cities, expanded trade, and filled the Forbidden City with art and splendor. They launched great maritime voyages under Admiral Jingyi, reaching as far as Africa, proof of China's unmatched might. But as centuries passed, ambition turned inward. The emperors feared the outside world and halted exploration, closing borders and burning ships. Paranoia took root within the red walls of the palace. Eunuchs controlled the court. Officials drowned in corruption. Natural disasters and famines swept the land as the empire grew rigid and weary. By 1644, rebellion and invasion shattered the dynasty. The Manchus marched through the Great Wall, the very barrier meant to protect them, and founded the Qing. In Chinese memory, the Ming became a warning that isolation can be as deadly as war. Picture the Forbidden City under a gray storm, golden roofs dim in the rain, the last emperor walking its silent courtyards before hanging himself, his empire already dust in the wind. The House of Atreus, Greece's bloodline of revenge. A curse that no prayer could break, a family devoured by its own crimes. The tale of the House of Atreus begins in the shadows of ancient Mycenae. King Atreus, seeking vengeance against his brother Thyestes, committed an act so vile it poisoned generations. He killed Thyestes' sons and served them to him at a royal feast. The gods recoiled, and a curse settled upon his bloodline. From that day, every child of Atreus carried the weight of that sin. Agamemnon led the Greeks to war in Troy, only to be slain by his wife, Clytemnestra, upon returning home. Their son Orestes avenged his father by killing his mother, hunted afterward by the Furies for matricide. Each act of justice became another crime, each generation paid for the last. To the Greeks, the house embodied miasma, spiritual pollution passed through blood. The message was clear, even kings cannot escape divine consequence. Imagine the marble halls of Mycenae at dusk, gold fading into crimson, every echo a whisper of the past. No victory, no offering, could cleanse the name of Atreus. It was a dynasty bound not by loyalty, but by vengeance itself. The Ptolemies, Egypt's poisoned thrones. A dynasty that turned divine blood into its own undoing. When Alexander the Great died, his general Ptolemy seized Egypt and crowned himself pharaoh. Thus began the Ptolemaic dynasty, 3 centuries of Greek rulers who claimed the legacy of the Nile. They wore Egyptian crowns, spoke Greek in their courts, and worshipped both Zeus and Ra. Yet their greatest obsession was not conquest, but control of the bloodline. Siblings married siblings to preserve royal divinity. Poison, assassination, and betrayal became palace rituals. mothers plotted against sons, brothers against sisters. Behind the golden thrones of Alexandria, the air shimmered with incense and fear. The dynasty ended with Cleopatra VII, a queen as brilliant as she was doomed. Her romances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony bound Egypt to Rome's fate. When defeat came, she chose the serpent's bite over humiliation. With her death, the line of the pharaohs was extinguished forever. To history, the Ptolemies stand as a warning that when divine power becomes obsession, it consumes itself. Picture the marble corridors of Alexandria, gleaming in torchlight, where every smile hides a dagger and every toast might be one's last. The Aztec emperors, empire of the sun, shadowed by prophecy. They believed their gods demanded blood, but destiny demanded theirs. The Aztec emperors ruled from the floating capital of Tenochtitlan, a city of dazzling temples and sacred ritual. To their people, the emperor was more than human, he was the bridge between heaven and earth, responsible for keeping the sun alive through sacrifice. The empire thrived under this cosmic order, its warriors capturing enemies not for conquest, but for the gods. Yet ancient omens spoke of a returning deity, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who would bring the end of an age. When Hernán Cortés landed in 1519, Emperor Moctezuma II mistook him for that god. It was a fatal mistake. Within 2 years, disease, betrayal, and Spanish steel destroyed an empire that had lasted for centuries. The Aztecs saw their fall not merely as defeat, but as prophecy fulfilled, the end of the fifth sun. To them, even collapse was sacred. Imagine the great temple at dusk, its steps painted in shadow, priests gazing at a blood-red horizon as thunder rolled over the valley. The sun had set on Tenochtitlan and on the divine empire that fed it. The Tudors, England's theater of power. A dynasty built on faith, love, and execution. The Tudor dynasty began in 1485 when Henry VII seized a fractured England and ended the Wars of the Roses. His reign brought stability, but his son, Henry VIII, turned stability into spectacle. Obsessed with producing a male heir, Henry broke from the Catholic Church, founding the Church of England so he could remarry. His 6 wives became emblems of his reign's cruelty and chaos, 2 executed, 2 divorced, 1 dead, 1 surviving. Under his daughter Mary I, England burned Protestants in the name of faith. Under Elizabeth I, it became a world power, but one haunted by fear, conspiracy, and execution. Cousins were killed, suitors betrayed, and faith turned weapon. The Tudors ruled like actors on a divine stage, believing their drama was destiny. To their people, they were both saviors and sinners. To history, they were proof that power can't exist without performance. Picture the Tower of London at dawn, mist coiling around the stones, a crown resting in the silence, and ghosts of kings and queens whispering through the walls. The Tudors gave England greatness, but left behind the echo of sacrifice. The Mughal dynasty, thrones of splendor and shadow. An empire of beauty that crumbled beneath its own brilliance. Founded by Babur in 1526, the Mughal Empire blended Persian art, Indian wealth, and Islamic vision into one of history's greatest dynasties. Under Akbar the Great, tolerance and innovation flourished, new architecture, new philosophies, and a golden age of unity. The empire glittered with jewels, silk, and poetry. But as centuries passed, luxury turned into weakness. Emperors grew distant from the people who built their palaces. Under Aurangzeb, religious zeal replaced harmony, and endless wars drained the treasury. By the 18th century, famine, rebellion, and European colonization shattered what remained. The dynasty that built the Taj Mahal, a monument to eternal love, was destroyed by human greed and pride. To the world, the Mongols remain symbols of unmatched grandeur. To history, they are a warning that beauty cannot hold an empire together. Imagine the peacock throne, its jewels glimmering beneath flickering lamps, as a fading emperor watches his kingdom dissolve beyond the palace gates. The splendor remained, but the soul was gone. The Yuan dynasty, Mongol glory, Chinese curse. They conquered everything except time itself. When Kublai Khan founded the Yuan dynasty in 1271, he united China under Mongol rule for the first time. His capital, Dadu, now Beijing, was the beating heart of an empire that stretched from Korea to Europe. Trade along the Silk Road flourished. Scholars, merchants, and envoys like Marco Polo marveled at its splendor. But the empire's greatness hid deep fractures. The Mongols ruled as outsiders, distrusting their Chinese subjects and enforcing rigid hierarchies. Famine and floods struck the land, while corruption hollowed the court. The divine mandate of heaven, believed to justify every Chinese ruler, began to turn against them. By 1368, rebellion consumed the empire. The Ming rose in their place, restoring native rule. The great Mongol Empire that had once spanned continents vanished into legend. In Chinese memory, the Yuan's fall was cosmic balance restored, heaven correcting arrogance. Picture Dadu's vast marble avenues, once filled with foreign grandeur, now silent beneath drifting ash. Even the mightiest conqueror, it seemed, could not command the heavens forever. The Stuarts, kings who lost heaven and earth. They ruled by divine right, until divinity lost its believers. The Stuart dynasty began with James I in 1603, uniting the crowns of England and Scotland. He believed kings were chosen by God, answerable to no one on earth. His son, Charles I, inherited that faith but not his father's tact. When he defied Parliament's authority, civil war erupted. The king's execution in 1649, by his own people, sent shockwaves across Europe. The monarchy returned with Charles II, a charming survivor who masked instability with decadence. His brother, James II, reignited the same divine delusion and was driven into exile by the Glorious Revolution of 1688. The Stuarts' fall marked the death of sacred monarchy itself. To their supporters, they were martyrs of faith. To history, they were dreamers trapped in a changing world, unable to see that crowns no longer came from heaven, but from the people. Imagine the throne room at Whitehall, empty beneath a cold dawn. The gilded chair gleams faintly, waiting for a king who will never return. The Stuarts believed God would protect their bloodline. But history had already written a last prayer. The Hawaiian royal house, the island's broken line. They ruled paradise until the modern world tore it apart. In 1810, King Kamehameha I unified the Hawaiian Islands after years of conflict, founding a dynasty rooted in sacred tradition and balance with nature. His reign brought peace and prosperity, blending ancient Hawaiian spirituality with selective Western influence. But the harmony he built would not last. As the 19th century progressed, foreign traders, missionaries, and businessmen began carving away the kingdom's sovereignty. Disease decimated the population. Western powers demanded control. King Kalakawa's efforts to preserve culture through diplomacy were met with deceit, and his sister, Queen Leleokalani, the last monarch, tried to restore authority through a new constitution. In 1893, American-backed forces overthrew her, annexing Hawaii soon after. The royal palace fell silent, and a sacred kingdom became a colony. To the Hawaiian people, their monarchy was more than politics, it was the soul of the islands. Its loss marked not just the end of a dynasty, but the severing of spirit from land. Picture Iolani Palace today, sunlight streaming through its empty halls, the Hawaiian flag still fluttering in quiet defiance. The crown remains, but its song belongs to history. The Merovingians, France's long-haired kings. A dynasty that mistook legend for destiny. The Merovingians ruled the early Franks from the 5th to the 8th century, their power stretching from the Rhine to the Atlantic. They claimed descent from a mythical sea creature, a tale that cast them as semi-divine, chosen by forces older than kingship itself. Their long, uncut hair was their sacred symbol. To cut it was to strip a king of his divine right. But their glory slowly dissolved into ceremony. Real authority passed to the mayors of the palace, ambitious nobles who ruled behind the throne. Kings became figureheads, holy in name but powerless in reality. When Pepin the Short deposed the last Merovingian ruler, Childeric III, he sheared his royal hair, and with it, 1,000 years of legend. The dynasty's fall marked the end of sacred monarchy and the rise of political realism. Yet the myth endured, whispered in medieval chronicles, revived by occultists centuries later as the bloodline of Christ. Imagine a dim Frankish hall, torches flickering against carved stone. A weary king sits motionless as scissors flash, and in that simple sound, divinity ends.